Since it's Hanukkah, let's begin with a Hanukkah Bart. I got a question this week. I think there was some fellow who went around online and he was letting everyone know that the Hanukkah story, at least the miracle 8-day oil part of it, is a fabrication. Chas v'shalom. And the explanation is because if you look carefully, you'll see that the story of Hanukkah happened a few hundred years before it's recorded anywhere. Where do we know the Hanukkah story from? The Gemara. It's Gemara in Shabbos. Right? There's no Masechta Hanukkah. There is a Masechta Purim, it's called Megillah, but there's no Masechta Hanukkah. Hanukkah is like a little afterthought on a daf, on Shabbos, daf Chaf Aleph. That's what it says. But the story of Hanukkah happened during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, right? So that's like a few hundred years before that. No mention in the Mishnah anywhere of Hanukkah. I mean, there is one mention. It says that if a guy's passing by on a camel and he has flax on the camel, and then he passes on the street next to a store, and in the store there's a candle. So the question is, who's obligated if the candle, the flax is like stretching out, it's like, and it hits the candle, and the candle burns the flax. So it says that if it's a regular candle, then the guy with the candle is obligated to pay. But if it's a Ner Chanukah, then he doesn't have to pay, because you're allowed to light a Ner Chanukah. That's the only mention of Hanukkah in the Mishnah. That's it. Like a, by the way, side gig. When you get to the Gemara in Shabbos, it tells the story, my Hanukkah, what is Hanukkah, that the Yevanim came into the Heichal, and they wanted to be, to contaminate everything, and they contaminated, there's only one jug of oil left. That whole story that you know, the famous one, that's in the Gemara. Why is it no before that? So they say the reason it isn't before is because, this is the idea going around, there's a book, Sefer Chitzonim it's called, Sefer of the Maccabim. Have you heard about it? It's a non-Jewish, non-authentic Jewish source. It's one of the books you're not allowed to learn. And there it says that the miracle was just the war. It doesn't talk about the oil. And obviously, to ask the 8 days and the oil is a critical part of the whole miracle. So they want to say, it's not mentioned because it only was introduced later on. Because of the actual miracle, it didn't happen. And then they wanted to make some kind of celebration. So they made a celebration, they added the oil. So somebody asked me this week this question. And he asked in all earnestness. He says, I don't understand. It's a good question. So he wasn't asking in jests and to argue. He just wanted to know the truth. So I went to look it up. Fascinating answer. There's a Chassam Sofer who says that the reason is because the Hashmonaim were Kohanim. So the dynasty that took over the Beis Hamikdash after the story of Hanukkah, instead of being from the tribe of Yehuda, was Kohanim. And as a result, Chachamim were upset with them because, you were allowed to win the Hanukkah story, but you couldn't become the king. And since you chose to become the king, that's not good. So they didn't want to record them, they waited till later on. That's one answer. But I want to tell you the Hasidic answer. And that's the one, it's brought by the Likutei Levi Yitzchak, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson. And he explains as follows. He says that the Yevanim, the Greeks, were fighting Lashkicham Teyosecha. They wanted us to forget the Torah. They wanted to say that spirituality, Torah, is not relevant. Now, which Torah do they want us to forget, he says? Not the written Torah, because the written Torah is written, so you can't really make anyone forget it. It's already inscribed. You can't destroy every single book of Torah in the world. It's not possible. What they wanted to destroy was the oral Torah, which means the ability of a Jew in this world, the sages, the rabbis, and the scholars, that's all the Jews, to attach themselves to the Torah, the oral Torah, that was the goal. So, how do we fight back? What is the most, the most descriptive part of the oral Torah? Is not the Mishnah, but the Gemara. There's, let's say, Gemara, there's Talmud Bavli, Talmud Yerushalmi. Talmud Yerushalmi is much more succinct and to the point. Talmud Bavli is arguments and fighting and bickering all the time. Talmud Bavli expresses how a Jew living in this world, with all his arguments and indecision and not knowing and arguing and fighting back and forth, that is holy. So the way the Hanukkah story takes place, right, it's that we don't record it in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is obviously the oral Torah, but the Mishnah is just yes or no. Talmud Torah, apostle, chayav, kosher, or whatever, that's what it doesn't argue about. There's no deep arguments. Where do you see the depth of the human spirit expressed? Specifically in Gemara, in Talmud Bavli. So in order to undo what the Yevanim wanted, we want to show that the oral Torah is real. The Yevanim said, the Greeks said, that a Jew living in this world cannot be holy. So the Torah can be holy, yes. But you and your ability to study the Torah cannot become holy. That's la'ashkicham terasacha. And how do we fight back? So it's not recorded in the Mishnah, because we wanted to show in the Gemara, with all the arguments, with all the flaws and weaknesses of what a human being is, oh, that's the Hanukkah story. Because what's Hanukkah about? It's about our ability to light up the darkness. So the darkness sometimes in our own lives, and the light of Torah is not there for us to, like as a theoretical concept. The light of Torah is there for us to come shining through. It's for us to transform who we are. And who does that more than anywhere else in the Torah? The Gemara. The Gemara is the human encounter with Hashem. And so where's the Hanukkah story told? Specifically over there in the Gemara. And that's why he says, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak says, the Gemara has, in Shas, we have 36 Masechtas. Why 36 Masechtas? Because it's 36 candles of Hanukkah. Without the Shamash. If you count eight days of Hanukkah, starting from 1 leading to 8, you'll get to 36 candles. And 36 Masechtas, that's the light of the human neshama. So, and that's why it's only recorded in the Gemara. And with that, let's jump into where we're holding. I believe we're holding in the middle of the Akdama. And we're talking about a similar idea. What we're talking about is the human struggle. The difficulty of all of us to find our space with Hashem and with spirituality and to be connected. And what we want to do is start off and see now. The question was, everyone would walk, the Hasidim would walk into the Alter Rebbe for a Yechidus. And they would come in and they would get a one-on-one conversation with him and they would feel heard and understood. And then when he responds, the response was, you knew it was unique, customized to you. And we all want a customized response. Like, what's this got to do with me? And then he says, I write down a book. And you're going to protest 3 objections, remember? What were they? One,
that my head is not going to understand.
Right? That I'm not holding in this space. In other words, I'm in the darkness, and therefore, how am I going to figure this one out? Number 2,
maybe the book is not going to talk to me.
right? The book might be written based on human intellect, and therefore may not talk to me. And C, even if it is based on Torah, everyone has their own place in Torah. How do you find your place, right? Now, I think in this group, right, more than anyone, we understand that there's what they call black sheep. And sometimes I'm the black sheep. Like, not just my child, but me. I have a different and unique system that should be applied to me. So the question really is, how do I find myself within the framework of Torah and spirituality? And so if I get to be in Yechidus one-on-one with the Baal Tanya, oh, that's powerful. But if I don't get to be one-on-one, so you're telling me I'm going to find myself what? With a book? And that's the question here. Why this book is different. So we're holding, if you take a look, no, did we get to the end of the Shammai and Hill? I didn't finish that. I think we were holding somewhere there. V'af shenit not Torah. Sorry? Where? V'hine, I'm going to start from V'hine af b'hilchas isa better. That's like a few lines before, no, that page. In the Hakdama, bottom of the first page of the Hakdama. We did it? About Shammai and Hillel? Okay, let me just read it. No, I think we did that actually. Let me read it quickly. When it comes to things that are asur and mutter, we find there's arguments all over. He says yes, he said no. Okay, so quickly. We say these are the words of living. Look at the word. I don't want to say it, but God is written Elikim, not Eleka. That's plural. How do you make it plural? Al Shem Moker Achayim, the Neshamas Yisrael. Because the source of living of the Jewish soul, Hanechlok is derech klal, Shleish Kavin, there's three channels, Yamin, Usmol, Ve'emtza. You have rightist, leftist, and centrist. Shem Chesed u'Gvura v'chulu. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. People are different. And that's why, even when it comes to matters of black and white, some Jews are black, some Jews are white, and some Jews are gray. Souls that are more kindness-oriented will be kindness-oriented. That's why you see in Shas, the biggest argument in Shas is Shammai and Hillel. And always, Shammai says no, Hillel says yes. It's always, Shammai is looking for gvura, severity. And Hillel says, let's be kind. All over. Why is that? So this does not mean that you paskin with feelings. It means that you paskin with your own intellect. But based on your soul is where your intellect will gravitate. Sometimes your intellect will lead you this way and sometimes it'll lead you that way. What he's saying is, there is no such thing as cookie cutter, even in Nigle, in the revealed part of Torah. So you can't say, that's what we do. Nope. There's this way and there's that way. If I'm talking to you about Gemara and Halacha, and there I'm telling you there's arguments, opposite extremes, polar opposites. See, nowadays we're used to a kind of religion which is that we established, right? Halacha is established. Everyone does this, everyone does that, that's how we do it. But imagine, like today, today's the 7th day of Hanukkah, you light 7 candles. Nobody's lighting 2. In those days, no. Some people lit 2. It wasn't like an established, systematized religion. If you were Shammai, you lit 2 today, right? Because you're going down. 8 on the first day, 2 on the second last day, and 1 on the last day. So everybody was unique and different. That's in matters of halacha. Can you imagine when it comes to the soul? What you want to say that all of us are just one, and that's the way it is? When it comes to matters that are hidden, what's going on inside you, that's the fear and love of the mind and the heart. Each individual, it's based on your capacity to grasp. It's what your soul, your heart is able to reach. There's no way that a book can ever be cookie cutter. Now, we always complain about this, right? Like, what do you mean? Has to be this way? That's the way it is? Everyone's the same? So the Alter Rebbe is laying it right away. Everyone is actually different. Certainly when it comes to matters of the heart. And therefore, if you're telling me to do this and you don't understand me, then you went right over my head and it's nothing to do with me. And we want a solution and an answer and a way to relate to God in a real, tangible way for every single individual on his or her level. The Zohar Kodesh says this, Al Posuk Noida Bash'arim Ba'ala V'Goymer. I believe it's how far we got. Noida Bash'arim Ba'ala is a song that you sing in Eishes Chayil. The woman of valor is singing, and you say her husband is known in the gates. Well, the woman is us, the recipient. The husband is the Almighty. And Noida Bash'arim Ba'ala means Noda, he is known, Bash'arim is the gates, Ba'ala, her husband. So you get to know Hashem in the gates. But the word Sha'ar, which means a gate, is a portal, also means L'sha'er is to grasp in your mind. And here's what happens. How you grasp Hashem in your mind, that's are the two words. The word is, the sha'er is a portal and to grasp. Because your mind is your portal by which Hashem and you unite. Hashem gets known to you, customized to you. That's Noida Bash'arim Baila. And when you sing on a Friday night, maybe think about these words. Noida Bash'arim Baila means Hashem gets known to you. You're the recipient, the woman. He's the man, the husband. And Hashem gets known to you, customized based on what you are capable and understand and what you need. And if that's the case, comes the big question of all. How am I writing a book which appears to be cold and detached from reality? Enter Tanya, a book that is like no other book. Now, you could learn Tanya and say, I'm just learning it like a book. You could, yes. But the Tanya, what you'll discover is, as you learn it, that it has the answers for you. It's absolutely customized for you. And as you will hopefully see, it is like walking into Yechidus one-on-one audience with the Alter Rebbe. So not only was he able to answer people when they came into Yechidus, but then he was able to answer people afterwards when they weren't coming into Yechidus by knowing what they were saying. And the reason is as follows. The reason why those three objections do not apply to Tanya is Ach beyoidai umakirai ko amino. I'm talking about those whom I know and I met them. The people, the men of our brotherhood and sisterhood who came to our country and over here, and they spoke to me and I listened to them. We spoke endearing words. The Gilule Fanai, and they revealed to me Kol Ta'alumois Libam, everything that's hidden in their hearts, Umoicham, and in their minds, Ba'avodas Hashem Atluya Beleid, in the service of God, which is hinged on the heart. You know, nowadays when people write a psychology book and they really score, sometimes they really get it. They'll write a book on marriage or on education or on sales, and it's all the psychology. And what they're doing is, it's called research says. They'll say to you, we researched this, and this is how it works in the world. And if you actually research and you actually do the work and you speak to people, then you can write for the people that you're talking about, and you can write them an explanation. But at the end of the day, that's just your mind, how you decided to explain to that person. Imagine you were a Rebbe. Imagine that the people coming in, as we said, are giving their own selves. It's a yechidus. They're walking in and they're uncovering the depth of their souls in the most sensitive spot. And they're communicating from that real, true, honest space. And imagine you are the kind of person who knows what to do with that and how to answer them. So this is the most real, true conversation that could ever be. The actual, right? Not when you go to therapy and sometimes you're just lying. So the therapist is trying to solve a problem that you don't have. And then you go again and again and again and commending yourself, I went to therapy. You did not go to therapy. Therapy is when the recipient is ready to be real and honest, and when the therapist has absolutely no agenda. And when the therapist knows Torah. So now you can align the two together. That's what the Alter Rebbe would do to people. And as he did this for many years, Tanya was written over the course of 20 years. That's how long it took him to write the book. So he says, Aleihem titev milasi. To you, I'm preaching. Uleshoyni eit sefer, in the book, the book of the writing of my pen. The kuntresi melo, in these pamphlets. Tanya was written initially as pamphlets. Before it was a book, it was little pamphlets. Hanikroim b'shem likutei amor. Remember, the name is compilation of sayings, because you know this all to be true. Whatever's written in Tanya is simple explanations and ideas of Torah. You're like, oh, that's what it means. It's not teaching you anything new. Melukotim mipisforim and mipisofrim, gathered from the books and the scribes. We already explained that at the beginning. The books that comes from the Maharal Prague, the Shalah, The scribes are the people who are verbal, which is the Baal Shem Tov, the Mizrich Magid. Kedoshei Elin, the holy ones, the Shmas Maiden, their souls are in Gan Eden, and the Forsamim Etzleinu, well known by us. Uktsas mehen Yermozim Nechakimin Beigris Hakodesh Mirabi Seinu Sheberes Hakodesh Tibonim V'Tikonim Herlamenu Amen. Some of them were written by letters from our rabbis in Eretz Hakodesh. Now, that refers to Reb Mendel Horodoka. So there was when the Baal Tanya, when the Maggid Mizrich passed away, the Baal Tanya went to his Rebbe, became for a short time Reb Mendel Horodoka, Reb Mendel Mivitebsk. Reb Mendel then moved to Eretz Yisrael, and he went together with Rabbi Avram. He went with the Kaliska, but he considered him to be his Rebbe. So it wasn't like a Rebbe Mamish, was a Talmid Chaver, student, but also a friend. And he heard some of this from him. He also means of Rabbi Avram ben Amalach. The Alter Rebbe had a class that he learned with when the Mizrich Magid, when he came in to the Mizrich Magid to learn, the Mizrich Magid got a Machavrusa with Rabbi Avram Amalach. The story goes, Rabbi Avram Amalach would sit with the Alter Rebbe and they would learn together, and they had a timer on the clock. So it was like, I don't know how much time, but an hour you, an hour me. So I'll teach you Nigla. The Alter Rebbe taught the revealed part of Torah, and Rabbi Avram Amalach was called the Malach because it was angelic. He taught him back the other one. And so there was a sand clock. And turn it over. So the Alter Rebbe said that he did a Chassidish Geneva, and when it reached almost the end of his, he wanted to get more time from him. So he was already in heaven, so he flipped the clock. So he got another extra 20 minutes there of time. One time they were learning, and Rabbi Avram took the Alter Rebbe on a trip, and he started to talk about like the world of Atzilus. And then he went higher. Atzilus, as we all learn what that is, a very lofty spiritual world. And then he went high into another spiritual world, another one. We'll learn some of them. And he goes all the way up. And the Alter Rebbe in the middle of it jumps out of the class. He runs to the side. He takes a bagel. He spreads butter on the bagel. Washes, makes a bracha, and eats. And Rabbi Avraham is sitting over there, and he didn't notice. He kept on going, and then suddenly he looks ahead, and he sees his chavros is not there. He looks, where are you? He's eating a bagel with butter. And so he says to the Baal Tanya, he says, "Nu, mele a bagel, but azay megushim, you're so coarse with butter." So the Alter Rebbe says to him, "When you were talking, I felt that my soul was about to expire, because I was actually listening to you, and you were taking me on these madrigas, and I'm not on your level that you are now. So I felt like my soul was about to expire, and I needed something to yank my soul back down to earth. I shouldn't actually expire. So I went and got the bagel, but the bagel wasn't coarse enough, wasn't material enough, and I needed the butter on the bagel to make it yank me back down to earth." In other words, this is a critical point. The goal is to be very spiritual, but remember, Hashem wants us to be down here, physical people.
Can I see something?
Yes.
What could you?
Pause.
Yeah.
So, Uktsasam shamati mipiyam hakadosh b'yestam payimon. Some of them I heard when they were over here, and they told me over here, and some of them are written in letters exchanged when they went to Eretz Yisrael. The Reb Mendel Vitebsk is buried in Tveria. Vechulam, all of them, hein tshuvos al shailes rabbis. These are all questions, answers to the many questions. Asher shoyalim be'etza kol anash dim dinaseinu tamid. These are the questions people ask. Kol echad lefi erkoi, each one according to what he needs, his value. Loshis etza is benafsham ba'avodas Hashem. We need solutions in avodas Hashem. I don't think we have this conversation enough. I think that we often assume that, of course you do it this way, right? It's like there is an assumption by parents, which is that every one of my kids is going to be, what do you mean? We took them to school, we raised them in cheder, we went them this way, and so what's the question? Of course you're all going to be, right, following this path. What do you mean? And then when a child says no, you're like, what does the book say now to do? And you don't know what the book says. Because the book that we're taught is a Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch is, you're supposed to keep Shabbos. And you're supposed to eat kosher. And you're supposed to light Hanukkah candles. That's the book. You know what the problem with the book is? That there's a human. And the human doesn't want to do the book. I mean, he does. But he gets depressed. And therefore, he doesn't know what to do. And sometimes he just feels some anxiety. And there's no book for that. And so, in Avodas Hashem, you get stuck. And you can't get to the Shulchan Aruch necessarily if you don't have a Shulchan Aruch of the soul. You know, the Tanya also wrote a Shulchan Aruch. He's called Shnei Or. 2 lights. Light of Nigla and the light of Primis Atera. He wrote a Shulchan Aruch Harav. And Shulchan Aruch Harav is a Shulchan Aruch.
But the Psak is different than the Ram. I'm saying...
All Hasidim used to follow the Shulchan Aruch Harav. That was the common system of how they did it. If you're asking about Chabad does not follow.
I know that Chabad does things different.
Chabad does not generally follow Shulchan Aruch Harav. The Alter Rebbe, in addition to Shulchan Aruch Harav, wrote Psakim in the Siddur. And that was for his Hasidim. Shulchan Aruch Harav was written for everybody, actually. So not necessarily does it. Sometimes there's arguments in it. So but the Shulchan Aruch, I mean, until the war, the Shulchan Aruch was what was used, and then unfortunately there weren't enough copies of it. So that's when it started to be less used by people. But certainly all Hasidim used to use the Shulchan Aruch Harav and still do to a large degree. But anyway, the Shulchan Aruch Harav is a phenomenal work on its own, which is not discussing that. Then he wrote another Shulchan Aruch in addition to that one, and that Shulchan Aruch is the Shulchan Aruch of the soul, also known as Tanya.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You're discussing that the Tanya relates to every person. So I have found, in my own experience of life, not learning the Tanya, but even Torah, or even sitting and saying Tillim, the more I am connected to my neshama, the more the Tillim or the Siddur or the Chumash is talking to me.
Right. Of course.
So it's like
So
Torah
what-
in general is going to speak to us the more we're connected to Hashem.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's the key, to find our connection to Hashem. Right? But imagine you would do it.
It's like fascinating to me when I'm in a certain situation that this parak of Tillim is so different than the last time I said it.
Right.
If
I want to make an observation there, right? Correct me if I'm wrong also on this one. But when when you have like a tzaddik that you go to, like a holy Rebbe, and you go to him and you go to the Rebbe and you want to see dveikus, right? You want to see that when he lights the Hanukkah candles, he's like all in. There's like a certain measure of dveikus, yeah? But what if you want to reach that dveikus that he's in? How do you reach that dveikus? I also want to have dveikus. And Bachlal, what does it mean? Because he's like appointed into the position that he's in, therefore by definition he has dveikus? Maybe. Apologies. I mean, 1 in a million obviously, but maybe he's putting on a show. Maybe he's not real. And maybe the whole thing is just one big show. And sometimes our kids see right through it.
Yeah, let's not push this point too much.
And then they say, so, right? So now, where's authenticity?
What is
So if we're teaching Torah in a way of like, it's almost like an abstract type of system. It's like, you need a daven. You need a daven in Chabad lingo. It's called davening ba'avodah. Davening ba'avodah means to daven and to really get it, and to really be able to get it. But what if you don't know how to? So you go in there and you daven and so you pretend. You make believe you're davening. And that doesn't do well for the real system because we have real problems. We got real issues that we want to deal with. And we have a system of how to do it. We don't need to go anywhere else. We have a system called davening. We have avodas haleiv, l'ovdoi b'chol levavchem, is one of the most important parts of Judaism, and somehow we don't learn how to do it. It's just assumed that, dveikus, that he's doing dveikus. We want to learn how to do dveikus. It's actually a systematized approach. How to get there. Liyois, ki ein azman groma oid lashiv lechol echad ve'echad al sheilase bifrotis. It's not the time to answer each person for his question specifically. So in other words, why am I writing this book? Because I don't have time to talk to everybody. And also, frankly, I talk to people in Yechidus and then they forgot what I said. So it's important to write it down so that you understand how to work it. Al Kain Roshamti, here's this most powerful line of Tanya. Here you go. Kol HaTshuvois al Kol HaShailis. That's what Tanya is. Remember that always. Because as you go through Tanya, every question you have will be answered in Tanya. That's a promise of the Alter Rebbe. I wrote down, that's a sweeping statement to be made by a tzaddik. I wrote down all the answers to all your questions. To remind you and to be a sign. Everyone should have it between his eyes to remember all the time. You won't need to come and listen to me, to hear me in Yechidus again. In this you will find comfort for your soul, for an aching soul. And real advice. Because of these lines, that's why Tanya is the book that it is. That's why it's so, I mean, it is probably one of the most used books in the world because it has all the answers to all the questions and it actually works. So once you understand Tanya, and it requires deep learning, it's a lot of learning. But once you do, you get to that you can find comfort for anything that you're having a challenge with. See this cold dover akosha avodas Hashem. Why? Because most books, he says, are not written by the people for the people. So everyone's got their own derech in avodas Hashem. He says, I listened to the people and I wrote them down, and I wrote down the derech to all the people that I was talking to. And so it's for them, and I'm actually writing the system down for them. And so you'll find your path over here. So it's written al pi Torah, and I'm telling you, I'm writing it for the people, so you'll actually find your path in the Torah, and every person will be able to light up their own lives in this, and all three objections will disappear. Now the question is obviously that most of us over here never walked into Yechidus by the Alter Rebbe. He said he's writing this to all those who came in, and he understood their problems, but he didn't understand your problems, did he? So the Rebbe Rashab explained once about this, that when the Alter Rebbe said, he says that learning Tanya is like having a Yechidus with the Alter Rebbe. It is the Yechidus of the Alter Rebbe, and the Hasidim would always explain that the Alter Rebbe saw, and in Ruach HaKodesh, he had a conversation with every neshama who would ever learn Tanya. And he has a conversation with you, and he says, I get your soul, and here it is, understanding you for what you are. But once you understand that he said that, try it out, and you'll see. In Tanya, you have all the answers to all the questions. Just one little technicality.
I knew there was a but. I was waiting for that one time.
Is that if you read the book yourself, it's unlikely you'll see that. If you read the Kontreisim, these pamphlets of Tanya, and you don't see the answers to your question, what should you do? Go to the scholars of your city, and they will explain it to you. They will teach it to you. In other words, Tanya needs to be passed on from one person to another. It needs to be alive, yes. So the person who's passing it on doesn't know the answer. But the Alter Rebbe says, I wrote down the answer for you. Just read the book and you'll see the answer right there. So it needs to be done in a lebedika way, live, basically actual learning from a person. For anyone who can teach Tanya, I ask the question, and once you learn Tanya, this applies to you. You have to pay it forward. Don't put your hand on your mouth. To be humble, shiflus, and right humility. Shel sheker, false humility, chas v'sholem, and say, I'm not teaching, God forbid. Once you know Tanya, I'm asking you to join the brotherhood, pay it forward, and start teaching. It's one of the critical parts of Avodas Hashem. You cannot keep it to yourself. You must teach. V'chanoida oina shamar al moinei bar. As we know, the bitter punishment for those who withhold food. Food is godly food. The goydel aschar and the great reward. Yimayim Razal Chazal say al pasuk meir einei shneim Hashem. The greatest thing in the world happens when you teach. You know what happens? You don't just illuminate the other person; your eyes get illuminated. Ki yo'ir Hashem panav aleim or pnei melechayim. Suddenly Hashem illuminates you. And that's this beautiful, brilliant, dazzling light of the King. And he ends up with a bracha. Mechai Chaim is the King. Hashem should give us the bracha. And let us live leyomim to the days where one man should not need to teach another one. Everyone will know Hashem directly. That's your mio. It's there as Hashem. Ishayahu says, Amen Keni Ratzin. Everyone should be able to know Hashem directly. You shouldn't have anyone else to need someone else, right? So here we go. The goal is basically that everyone should be able to learn and understand themselves. Now, I'm going to point out right away, there is a challenge to Tanya. This is the shita, the approach of the Baal Tanya, right? The reason why many people haven't discovered it, and so there's different, right? There's arguments coming from different sides. I'm going to tell you the brotherhood argument, the Hasidic argument against Tanya. So many other Hasidim were opposed to Tanya. Why? Tanya is a path called Chabad. What does Chabad mean? Chochmah Bina Das, right? Now, in Chabad, the name given to the other Hasidison is Chagas. What's Chagas? There's 10 spheres, as we'll learn. Chabad are the 3 intellect. Chagas are the first 3 of the emotions. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. So the Polish Hasidus, right, and the Ungarische, etc., what they are is really focusing on the emotions and not the intellect. It was designed to not be intellectual. And that's why you take a look at some very holy works, Hasidic works. What will you discover? Other works. Let's take some of the really holy works. The Kedushas Levi. When you think of Kedushas Levi, what do you think of? Fire. Right? Noam Elimelech. Fire. Right? These are books, when you read them, it's unbelievable. Your soul lights up as you read it. If you ever learned them, anyone learned them?
Fire and Avodas Hashem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fire, total fire in Avodas Hashem. What's the problem? The Alter Rebbe says, I can't do that.
You need to understand first.
I need to explain why, how I got to the Vart. So when you learn one of the Polish style of Hasidus, you'll see it's on fire without the explanation as to why. It'll tell you a Vart, right? It'll say a Vart about the Hanukkah, why you light candles, right? Hoidus l'halal, hoidus means to light up, to acknowledge, and l'halal to light up. And it'll give you this fiery Vart. And when you learn it, your soul will be passionately on fire. And then the fire will disappear. Why? Because you didn't understand yourself. And so you can't integrate it into your own life. You don't have the Chabad. Now, if you want to know why that is, it's by design. They don't want you to have the Chabad. Because what they felt is that if you understand the intellect, human beings, when you give them too much understanding, they're going to mess it up. They're going to botch it up. So the holy rebels, the holy tzaddikim felt that it's much better for the Jews not to get the explanation behind. What you want to do is latch on to the holy tzaddik.
That's why they were upset about the Rambam's wearing Ruchamosa, right?
Because
Because it was understanding.
okay, that's a different, correct, the same idea. Yes, it's a slightly different word, correct, but the same idea. Marin Avuchin basically today, sometimes he asks questions you didn't think of. Like he's asking a question in philosophy. We're not philosophers nowadays.
Right, no, but I'm saying even back
But yeah, the same idea. Yes.
then, they
Yes.
didn't want people to
Now
read
what?
too much.
Correct. What I'll tell you is this much: start learning Tanya, and then go learn the Kedushas Levi and the Noam Elimelech, and you'll be like, whoa!
Difference.
Now I get what he's saying.
Isn't it scary to base everything on our intelligence and our intellect, which is so limited?
Correct. It is. It's very scary, and that's why the Alter Rebbe is taking a big risk. Yes.
That's why
And if
people
I
are
don't
against
understand it.
But the beauty of the beauty of Tanya is
So where does I'm sorry, but I just want to know where does the Litvaks fit into this?
the
They don't do
Litvaks.
any of this.
If you want to know, Tanya is very Litvish.
That's what I'm saying.
The Tanya was written in Lita.
I know.
The Alter Rebbe was known by his Chaverim as the Litvak.
Right, I know that.
Because
Because it's all
what is a Litvish approach? It says intellect,
Yeah,
right?
intellect, that's what I'm
So,
asking. Why-
so the Hasidim said, no, go fire. And then the Alter Rebbe was like, okay, take the fire in intellect. And they said, 1 second. That's what they said. We said not.
Right. That's
Right?
what I want to try.
So he's like, no, that's the one. Because here's what we do. What we want to say is that this is the Litvish Hasidus.
So it's the intellect in the what? In the neshama?
Yes, it's the bond of intellect and emotion together, basically.
Still running earlier.
This one?
You don't see it, but okay.
It's the bond of intellect and emotion together. So basically, it's emotions understood and gone on fire. And it's like, it's a very interesting type of approach. You know, there's a story told of this chassid who went from, he was by the Mittler Rebbe, the chassid of the Baal Tanya, and he went to the Mittler Rebbe. And Mittler Rebbe was Baal Tanya's son. And the Baal Tanya's chassidus was Chabad, but the Mittler Rebbe, his son, was like, phew, Chabad. He really took it to a whole new level of explanation. So the Mittler Rebbe went once to, the chassid went to, he was supposed to leave, whenever he left the Rebbe, he would go and chazer chassidus, he would teach it, that's how they spread the word. He went into a Beis Medrash in the Apter Rav's Beis Medrash. And by mistake, he didn't realize Apter Rav's Beis Medrash. And after I saw a whole lot of Hasidim crowded around this guy listening to the Torah that he was saying. And he listened to what it was, and he chapped right away what's going on over here. So he started screaming at him, Magam lichbosh asamalka ini babois? He says, what, you want to like conquer the queen in my home? You're bringing that opposite system into my place? So he cursed him. Then he would die that year. So the Chassid went right back to the Mitzvah Rebbe and he's like, I got to curse, what should I do? So the Mitzvah Rebbe told him, did you say anything against him? He said, no, I didn't say a word against him. He says, if that's the case, then the humiliation that you endured was already your punishment, and it's okay. You'll live the year, I promise you. And he's, I need a promise, I promise. And so those are the kind of arguments that were going on. By the Chernobyl ones told the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe gave a whole explanation. They were mechutanim, and he gave a whole explanation. And he started teaching, and he says to him, he says, Mechutan, Yukach no me'at mayim. Right? It says, take only a little bit of water. In mayim elatayah, Torah's right water. He says, what are you teaching so much? Just give a little bit. So he told him, what do you mean? Avram said it to the Malachim when he thought they were Arabs. But to a Jew, you got no harbe mind. You got to learn a lot. And so this is the approach of Tanya. The approach of Tanya is that nowadays, certainly, I think you see it nowadays in a very crystal clear way. If you want to be Jewish and you want to be really from, you have to go with this approach. You cannot tell people, here's the fire, get excited, and that's it. It's very nice.
With little kids, I was walking with my grandson yesterday. I'm moving to a neighborhood he's afraid to walk there. It's not so terrible, but so he told me, Babi Chamoira. I started talking the Jewish talk, telling him that, that Hashem is watching, whatever. He said, it's all very good what you're saying, but Lamaisa, I'm scared.
Right.
So I'm saying kids today
exactly.
are buying
And therefore, if you don't have a real understanding, it ain't gonna work.
I'm giving you advice. I know you're gonna be scared, and you're gonna do it, and by doing it, you're gonna be less afraid. And I was telling him it's a process. I don't expect you, because Bobby said it,
right,
that you're gonna be able to do. But had he not said that, it would have stopped at that level. I was like, Bobby's telling me things that I'm not up to, so
right,
why are you even saying it to me?
So when our kids are asking us questions, which are very harsh and very difficult and challenging, we need to be ready to understand and to know how to teach, how to give it over, how to communicate. And I assure you, what you'll discover is that once you understand it, those other Sfarim, they're the same thing. They all learned by the same teachers. They all learned by the Maggid. The Ne'am Elimelech and the Mezusha Vanipoli and the the Barditcheva and all those holy tzaddikim were all part of the Chevrai Kadesh. They learned in the same group. So you'll see they're all saying exactly the same thing. They're saying the Torah of the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov. But the approach, and suddenly you'll be like, oh, that's what you meant. And suddenly you get it and you understand it, and then understanding is the key. And now comes the last part of
Why
the...
didn't sorry, I'm still trying to understand. If it's the intellect, why didn't the Litvaks, why were they against it?
The
Why
Litvaks
were
were
they so-
against the study of the whole Hasidus in the first place.
But what is it then?
There was a snagdus, that's a different conversation, but if you want to know briefly, there was the Alter Rebbe had misnagdim,
I know.
right? Misnagdim were real people who believed that the whole approach was going to destroy Judaism.
Why?
So the primary reason was, there were a few primary reasons, but one of the main reasons was, remember the way Judaism was built. It was built for the scholars. There was a very distinct hierarchy amongst Jews. And that is, there were the great scholars, those who studied and those who learned. And there was the simple people, right? So the scholars were Talmidei Chachamim, right? They were the leaders. And then everyone else, what was it? Followers, Amaratzim. But they learned enough to know the other guy's a scholar. You have to learn a little bit to know the other guy's a scholar, right? The Alter Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov really, came along and said, no. Every Jew's holy. What makes him holy? Nothing. His neshama. So you're like, what do you mean? Doesn't have to learn? Nope. Doesn't have to learn anything. So they're like, so then you're going to stop everyone from learning. Because now they're not going to learn Torah. Right? Because if you're telling me I'm holy just because I am, so then why am I going to work and do Torah and mitzvahs? And the Baal Shem Tov would look at a Yid and he would say, Atzmus Amaus right there, the Eibishter himself was right there in this. This is the Heilige Neshama. You ever heard that conversation? That's Hasidic conversation. A Heilige Neshama. Today you hear most Litvaks talk that way too. That's the Baal Shem Tov's ideas seeping in. So they were against it for obvious reason. What you really see, and this is a conversation which I think last week we had and led into, I'm not sure, sound like a lot of issues there, but you will end up learning more Torah if you feel more connected. Which means if you tell me my connection to Hashem is if I learn Torah, that's nice. But if you tell me, what do you mean? You don't need to learn Torah to be connected to Hashem. You are godly. When you send that message, it's not unconditional love. It's neshamadika love. Unconditional means you don't need to do anything. You don't believe in unconditional love, you believe you got to do Torah. So the vart is, if I touch your neshama is going to look for Hashem. Neshamas want God. If you don't talk to the neshama and you keep on squashing her and pelching her and not allowing her to express herself, then sure, he doesn't want Torah. He's going to scream and shout, I don't want Torah. But if you talk to him, neshama dikareid, then he wants Torah.
And that's what the Tanya is, the Shema Degrade.
Yeah.
It's going to teach us how to connect even when we're not feeling like connecting.
Yes. There's a troubleshooting guide. But before you get to the troubleshooting guide, do you even know who you are?
We're working on it.
You get the problem? Most of us have no clue who we are. Do you? Do you know?
We never grew up this way for sure.
Have you ever seen a map of who you are? Imagine you live in Brooklyn and you want to take a drive to Muncie or to Lakewood. Remember once upon a time you used to use maps when you wanted to get somewhere, right? So you in order to survive, you have to look at the map and you have to know, okay, I'm here, he goes there, and that goes there, and then that highway and that road. You have to understand the roads. Today we're like blind, you just follow the ways. But if you don't have a map, you'll get lost. So why is it any different in the human soul? Do you know what makes you tick? Do you know the psyche of the human soul? That a human being is always running in 5 levels of intellect, emotion, thought, speech, and action. Do you know the thought, speech, and action are garments of the soul, unlike the intellect and emotion, which are the soul? Do you know how you change an emotion, how you change the way you understand by going deeper into your soul? Right? These are questions that exist inside of us. And This is who you are. You live in this space all day, all night. This is what you're doing all the time. And if you don't understand,
Then you don't understand.
you're literally running around in the darkness, not knowing who you are,
It's
and
very frustrating.
it's frustrating, exactly.
So that's why I felt like a total failure when I failed. My whole life was mother.
Right? It's supposed to be a certain way, and then it's not. Right.
We're given a map. We're given a very clear map from cradle
I
to
know,
cradle.
so what, yes,
Yes.
I got a map.
It's just a
do that.
1D map.
והנה, אחר שנספשתו הקונטרייסים הנ"ל בקרב כל אנש הנ"ל. And this is just interesting to know historically. So Tanya was made in contrasting, right, in little booklets. And after the booklets were given out, what happens? They went out, I gave out booklets. Because it wasn't an actual book of Tanya, it was little booklets. And it went out to all Anash. Be'atokis rabois. They were given out in many people would copy them, and there were no copy machines. So people had to write them down. And what do they do? Midei soifrim shainim, for various scribes, umeshunim.
Change that.
They changed the words. They would actually take the Tanya, misnagdim. They were against the Alter Rebbe, and they would change the words of Tanya, and he was fighting a war. There were many mistakes. So obviously some mistakes are natural, right? If one guy's going to copy, he's going to make a mistake. But the trouble was they weren't all natural mistakes. Many of them were deliberate mistakes. Because people were against Tanya, against the Alter Rebbe, and fought him.
They
And
were
so
just tweaking it according to
they would change the words, they would say things that ended up being kfir, and then they would say, look, the Alter Rebbe said it, right? When the Alter Rebbe, remember after he wrote because he wrote the Tanya, he was put into prison. That's the Yutis Kislev story, right? 53 days he sat in prison for the 53 chapters of Tanya. And they accused him of treason. He was on death row, in case you understand how trumped up the charges were. So now I'm writing a book. Velazois, thank God for them, we have a Tanya. Without them, we would never have had the Tanya. Velazois, not varucham shel anoshim efrosim, they're very chashiv people, important people. And in Kuvi Manal, Ne'evel Adap, they mentioned on the other side of the page. Liktroach begufam u'moedim, they use their money and their bodies, they'll be Manal to bring these booklets, the base at first to print. Menukim mikol sig v'to seifim u'mogoyim heitev, free of any mistakes. It's now going to be in print book format. Ve'amina le'polo tova yishar chela. I say yashar koyach to those who do good. Because it's a curse that is anyone who is masig gvul, who takes away someone else's parnasa. Al kain ki huda v'yidikra ka'asin. I'm going to come as an extra to the pasuk, right? That's what it means. Lemishdi guda rabba. So in other words, it should be the pasuk says that you have imcherem, but I'm going to put a tremendous isur al kol hamatpisim on all the printers. Shelo latpis kontreisim anal, not to print these books. Lo the atzman, lo the gir, not them, and not any of the agents. Bilti rishus and kuv manal, without permission from those. Mesha chomish shonim yom close at first, 5 years from when the print is there. Those 5 years in the last 230 years have been renewed every 5 years. They keep on printing it again and again and again. This is my message of Likutei Amorim. And that is the beginning. So now he's writing why there's a Tanya. Now I'm going to give a quick, brief intro into the actual Tanya. Okay? In the opening of Tanya, what we're going to learn is fascinating because I ask you the question, if you had to open up and begin teaching someone, what would be the first thing you want to teach them about Hashem? You're meeting someone and they don't know nothing from nothing, or they're struggling. What would you say to them? I would think you would start and say, listen, there's an Eibishter, there's a God. And God created the world. That's how it would start, somewhere there. The Alter Rebbe wrote that, it's called part 2 of Tanya, Shari Yichud Ve'emunah. Shari Yichud Ve'emunah was meant to be part 1 of Tanya. That's what the intention was. That's why very often you'll see he says, as I explained earlier, and he really is later. But then he changed his mind, so to speak, and he decided to put this part first. Part 1 went to part 2. It's called Shari Yichud Ve'emunah, and part 2 became part 1. And part 1, he says the most important thing for you to understand right away.
Hashem loves you.
Different point. He goes into when you start Avodas Hashem, you have a perspective that you need to be a tzaddik. That's how we are. We call it, in a different word, different names, a godel. You believe that when you're a kid, right? Every kid, believes that when I get to the age of 40, 50, whatever, to a kid, it's usually when he's, when he's 10, when I'll be a bucher, I'll be 18, I'll be a holy tzaddik. And what do you discover? And when you're 16, and when you're 18, and when you're 20, and 40, and 60, and 80, you still got the same Yetzer Hara. Essentially, you never get anywhere. And then you put yourself down. It is one of the most difficult experiences for anyone in Avodas Hashem when you come to the realization that I'm nowhere. I didn't get anywhere. I'm not a tzaddik. I didn't accomplish anything. Man, nothing makes any sense. And the Alter Rebbe says, I want to open up right there in a conversation with you, direct to you. I need you to appreciate, that's the whole opening, to appreciate what the goals are, what the aspirations are. There is no virtue in being a tzaddik. No one ever told you that. You're not supposed to be a tzaddik. He opens up and he says, it says to be tzaddik, it's a place to strive for, but it's not a place to be. And in fact, you're designed to be a kirosha, a struggler. This is why it's the book of Beinonim. What if you're not a Beinoni? You strive to be a Beinoni. But to say that you won't struggle, that's a problem. One of the biggest problems with the state of Israel is that there was an assumption made by whoever made the assumption that we built a state. So we're going to get to a point of recognition among the nations. We're going to get to a utopia. Same way there's New Jersey and Florida, we're going to have Israel. The state for the Jews to be, as we are. And then you keep on falling flat on your face because you realize that Florida exists and New Jersey exists, but Israel, can I say they exist? I don't know. Everybody's trying to kill us and annihilate us all the time. And 76 years into the state's existence, it's struggling for existence. It's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. But when you come to realize, right, so you can fall into a state of depression. It's so sad. We always have to protect this border all the time. Seriously, you want to stand by the Holland Tunnel and whatever, and always protect New Jersey from New York all the time? No, it's like, we're good. But in Israel, if you don't protect it all the time, you get October 7th. Why is that? Well, till Mashiach comes, there's a struggle. And if you don't embrace the struggle and see the virtue and value and glory of the struggle, then you fall into a depression.
But you feel like a failure constantly.
You feel like a failure. Exactly.
Is there a different struggle though? Because there can be the same one.
What do you mean? Yeah, of course it's a different struggle all the time. But what he's going to show us is there's a war to be won. There's a battle. And the battle is happening between the inside, right? Knowing, understanding that there's not one of you, there's two of you. That's the opening of Tanya. You have multiple parts, multiple personalities. And they're at war with each other. And there's a struggle called life. And that struggle is glorious and spectacular. It's what makes you special. It's what makes you awesome. You're not bad, you're good.
It doesn't feel awesome.
Right, that's what Tanya's going to open up with. The most important message to begin with is to realize that perfection is not a virtue. This is the book of Beinanim, not the book of Tzaddikim. It's a book designed for a human being to understand himself and herself and to struggle and to work and to understand the goals and aspirations and power. And once you do, you become a living Yid. Because you realize, right? Think about it, in the back of your mind, it's always like, oh, I'll never be that. By the way, in life also, we want to be the richest guy in the world. Oh, the richest person in the world. But if I don't have enough money, I'm not special. If I'm not the most successful at what I do, I'm not special. And the Chiddush here is understanding the specialness of you. And that's the opening of Tanya. The opening is a realization of who you are.
That ability to struggle.
Yes, in the struggle lies Eloikus. And that's what we have to work
I
on.
feel like
And finding Hashem there.
it's so validating